Hi, good evening. It is 7:01 p.m. on January 27th, 2022. I'd like to call the Public Safety and General Government Committee meeting to order. We'll start with roll call. Councilmember Alterman.
Here.
Councilmember Ayers.
Present.
Councilmember Goldstein. Councilmember Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Keegan.
Here.
And Councilmember Revelous.
Here.
And Chair Jen McMurr is also here. I want to call for an approval of the last meeting's minutes. Does anybody have any changes? All right, all of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All of those
Aye.
not in favor? And anybody abstaining? Please note that Councilmember Ayers and Councilmember McMurr have abstained. Is there anybody who has received any notice or any word from any public participants that they would like to read into the record? Okay, we did just receive an email about a discussion item that we will be going over this evening in the agenda.
Excuse me, Jen.
Yes.
We do have Diane Larichello who's raising her hand.
Oh, great. I was just going to read something in the record from her. So that's great. You can go ahead and allow her to speak.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good evening, Chairman McMurr and the newly minted Public Safety and General Government Committee of the Common Council. My name is Diane Larichello. I just saw the agenda, so I apologize for not sending an email to all of you. You should see it in your phones or it relates to one of the items on the agenda. But tonight I just wanted to comment on a few, three items. I know I have a 3-minute limit thereabouts. The first thing is I have on occasion observed this committee, especially when it was called the Personnel Committee. And I am very pleased that you are now called the General Government Committee. I think that is a terrific way. I look forward to it. It has great potential for allowing more oversight or at least discussion of the whole of government approach. So I look forward to sharing observations, but also I wish you luck in this newly put together committee. I think it's great. On the police department, number one on your new business agenda, I wanted just to suggest that in my read of what you're being asked to vote for, and I look forward to, I'm trying to understand it. It seems to say that any grant program that doesn't require a matching fund will not come to your committee for questions or discussion, that it will just automatically go to the mayor's office. While I'm so happy when we do get grants that help us do the work of the city and the needs, I wanted to know what would be the, I just throw up a word of caution, is that I think looking at the council's charter, any monies that we accept, even if it's in a grant, there needs to be some kind of check and balance. So how will the council know which grants are being put together, and how will you weigh in if you feel a grant may or may not be going in the right direction? Number two, item on the new business, and that has to do with what I emailed you relating to the hybrid police vehicles. At least for the last 10 years, on occasion during the budget discussions, I have requested and also asked of some of the staff, even from police and fire department, if we can begin cycling into more renewable energy in our fleet operations where it's possible. And there was a very slow but eventual shift on occasion for hybrid vehicles. But I wanted to suggest, I ask that you please consider tabling this until you have more of a chance to take a look at the benefits of electric vehicles where they're plug-in. There are many police and other emergency departments throughout the country that have switched to EV. There is a
Ms.
overall-
Loricello, I do not mean to interrupt you, but you have reached your 3 minutes. So I would like you to go ahead and finish your sentence if you can.
I certainly will.
Thank you.
So I ask that you table this because you'll be told that hybrid is the next best step, but the article talks about Westport, and while I have great respect for Deputy Chief Susan Zecca, this has been a ping pong ball going back and forth for years. I just ask that someone from this committee consults the EV Club of Connecticut. They have terrific data and information that will help the police department and this committee assist and our city in having a lower impact, saving money, and having reliable vehicles.
Thank you very much,
thank you.
Ms. Loricello. I appreciate that. I want to take a minute to recognize the other council members that have joined our committee this evening. Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Burnett, and Councilmember Nijelski Eichner. So thank you for joining us. We are going to start, if there's no other public comments. I just want to double check that.
That was all for now.
Great, thank you so much. So we are
You're
going to
welcome.
start with our panelists this evening. I have invited Dr. Estrella and some of her team members to come talk to us about safety in the schools. I know that it has been a little bit of time, but this is the first meeting we've had as a committee for public safety and general government. And so I wanted to have them address us as a committee and also anybody who's viewing in the city about school safety and where we're at with that right now, especially given the threats that we had endured at the high school level and some of the fighting that has been reported in the high schools. But we'll be talking about general school safety. So I will pass it over to you.
Thank you, Councilwoman McMurray. So if you've been following the Board of Education conversations as far back as September, we've been having ongoing conversation with the board around improving our safety and security processes across the district. We have incorporated recently a safety and security task force that Councilman Burnett is part of under the lens of the NAACP. And we have a number of constituents from the BOE as well as other constituents within the community that will help shape some of the conversation around behavior intervention and support. Because some of the challenges that we've had have been aligned somewhat with also looking at the social emotional well-being of our students and how that's tying into their behavior needs. But also particularly looking at the disproportionate number of Black and Brown children that have engaged in recidivist suspensions and looking at what systematically is happening that's leading to those patterns and trends. And if you recall back when we engaged in the equity project, that was one of the parameters that came about and one that we kind of re-emphasized earlier tonight when we started our conversation around the behavior intervention protocol that we are working on. Within the task force, we're looking at a number of elements. We're looking, one, obviously, at improving what used to be called the code of conduct, and hopefully passing that over to the policy committee within the BOE to further engage and hopefully move forward to the full board. We're also looking at emergency response systems, which encompass lockdowns, particularly when there is a threat, either bomb or any other kind of threat within our school system, making sure that we have adequate processes to support schools in any of these events. And also to have response systems if there's a fire, if there's a leak somewhere that inhibits us from running school business as is expected. And just making sure that we have adequate evacuation processes, not only to outside of, to come out of the building, but also to have sites in which students can transfer to and have that well documented through through school safety plans and district-wide safety plans. So when Ryan Harold came in, one of the things that we discussed was really taking a look and conducting audits around our current safety plans by school, and talking about how to enhance the document to have more specificity and more details around what are the protocols and elements that we need to further consider to improve, which will also be part of the conversations that will happen through the task force itself. The other component that we've been looking at is occurrence reporting and how it's happening throughout the organization at large. Some of the current systems that we have in place need improvement, particularly in how, if quickly and expeditiously people are inputting incidents, and the specificity of where, how, and when these incidents take place, so that we can then collect adequate data to make informed decisions around where we need additional resources and support. Coupled with that, we're also looking at what elements of support we need around safety and security. You know, we've had a shortage around SROs, and I'll have Ms. Fayoy speak more about some of the efforts that we've engaged in collaboration with the police department, who have been amazing partners to us throughout the year. Like we've had shortages with teachers, they've had shortages in staff as well, but we've managed to create systems to really support our schools despite some of the limitations that they themselves have as well. And we've been looking at that element, plus looking at safety agents, how many we have on site, and do we have an adequate number to really support the need. We recently added an additional agent at Norwalk High School. One of the challenges we've had this year is around staffing, is finding personnel to staff some of the vacancies that we've tried to fill. It has not been an easy process. But fortunately, this week, we've actually been able to hire a female agent at Norwalk High School, which was something that was needed, and will really alleviate some of the work that the current agents that are there are trying to do to maintain the safety and security of our students there. We've also conducted audits in terms of the current equipment that we use to monitor and observe our buildings, particularly our cameras. And we found some areas that we want to further improve. So we've been in conversation with different consultants and talking about how we can potentially enhance some of those systems to provide more visibility in areas that we need the additional visibility. So as you know, part of the capital request this year included resources to support some of the safety and security work that we're trying to do, even things as simple as exits throughout our campuses, particularly our elementary schools, where they currently are not alarmed, and it's highly recommended that they are, so that if we have a child as a runner, or in a situation where there is a false entry, our agents are alerted and we can engage in lockdown protocols that will ensure the safety of everyone in the building. So just to summarize, we've been looking at a number of processes throughout the organization, and through the safety task force, we will continue to engage in further conversations that will allow us to refine and better define the protocols that we're trying to establish. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Fayoy to speak a little bit about the work she's done so far with the SROs, and then Mr. Harold can speak about what he's done thus far as he entered in his new role.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. And good evening, council members. I feel like I've seen you every single day for the past couple of weeks. So it's nice to see you again on a different topic. We're not talking school facilities. But thank you for having us. And I will try not to be redundant. Dr. Estrella did cover quite a bit. I think one of the first things that you should know, just in terms of our commitment to school safety, is that the prior position that Mr. Harold currently holds used to be a 10-month position, and Dr. Estrella right away had us work to find the funding to actually make this a year-round position, because obviously safety is a year-round commitment to our staff and students. So that was one of the first things that we were actually able to do, and then look through our department to identify other funding areas to be able to enhance the programs that we did have in place while we're planning to actually enhance safety for our students. So I will share with you some of the things that we do have. We do have something called Lightspeed, which actually monitors student behavior on their devices and alerts the school principals right away based on keywords that it searches for. Anything that is self-harming or that is potentially harmful to other students, we're alerted right away, even throughout the night. And there's a system and protocols in place for how it is that we respond to them. We have Raptor systems that do scan in every visitor in the building, and we've enhanced those systems a little bit since the fall, and I'm sure Ryan can speak to that. I'm trying not to overstep with what Ryan will share with you. And we are currently, like Dr. Estrella said, working to get some additional systems and maintain some consistency across our schools and how it is that we are responding to situations. That's the focus of our work right now. But I'm going to turn it over to Ryan so that he could share with you some things that he has done since joining our team a couple of months ago. And I'll have you know that Ryan's first week was complex because it was the time when we were having all of the threats, but Ryan has been instrumental in leading us through. So I will turn it over to him. And the one thing that I will say, even before Ryan came on, that Ryan has continued is the strong partnership with NPD. We knew that there were going to be some concerns with the staffing. And the NPD had told us from the very beginning that we would try to have those positions or that program become robust again, but we were able to problem solve and have day lot officers take on additional shifts and really just increase the collaboration at the central office level between the chief, the deputy chief, and have them participate in a lot of the planning that we do. And again, we have an excellent relationship with Sergeant Orr and the other sergeants, making sure that the communication lines are always open. So I do have to thank everybody in the MPD for the support that they have been able to provide us in lieu of having the SRO program be as robust as it once was. Given that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, if that's okay with everybody.
Sure,
Ryan.
thank you. I mean, I definitely have to start off by seconding the fact that NPD has been incredibly supportive. You know, they were able to squeeze me in into their busy schedules. So we do have a standing meeting once a month where we talk about all concerns. How can we work together? How can we improve communication? And both Deputy Chief Walsh, Deputy Chief Zecca, and Sergeant Orr are just a phone call away at all the So I want to thank them for all their support. So when I came on only about 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago now, the first thing we wanted to do was really evaluate the current systems. You know, the success of, and ensurement of safety is all about systems, structures, and protocols. So the first few weeks was evaluating these current procedures that we had in place. In some situations, we had to create new ones. In other situations, it was just updating or reworking or tinkering with existing ones. In other systems, were done very, very well, and we just rolled them out to the rest of the schools so that we all have the same common practice and using the best practice, you know, based on evidence. Some of those structures that we that we rolled out. First thing we did around our emergency management was we centralized all of our reporting processes. So previously schools were keeping their own documents and their own recording. So through our Raptor application, we were able to set it up so that all schools report centrally. Number one, this helps with scheduling. It keeps schools on track. It gives us real-time information about the drills that schools are having, when they're having them, and then of course compliance and making sure that schools are sticking to the schedule and in compliance with the regulations laid out by the state. Another good system that we rolled out in terms of discipline was we worked with the technology department to create a discipline dashboard. So right now it's updated daily. We're able to track suspensions and occurrences, and we're able to although it's in its infancy, we're able to break down based on a bunch of demographical factors to really identify trends and be proactive when we're identifying some concerning areas. The creation of that is really kept us on top of a lot of things, identified schools that need support and groups of students that need support. And although it's called discipline, it really is about student support, students that are going through crisis and how we could get them back on track as fast as possible. Gaggle and Lightspeed were mentioned. So we did have, a great tool that was that again scans and monitors all of our student internet activity and alerts our school as well as the central office. We went ahead and we created a protocol around this to not only acknowledge that we've seen the alerts, but we're also tracking these alerts now. So because of privacy issues, Gaggle could not and Lightspeed could not produce a report with student demographic information. So I keep a running list of every alert that we get. And again, basic demographical factors, tracking these to identify students that are in need and groups of students that are in need, whether that's by grade level, male, female, school, ethnicity, all these different things. And it's really been a great tool, again, to stay ahead of situations before they get at hand. Another process that we've put in place is our building response teams. So all schools are required to have not only an incident command structure that identifies the structure in an emergency, the command structure, but also we want to identify specific staff members that will respond during these emergencies. So all schools have at least 10 or 12 specific staff members and responsibilities and duties that they're responsible for during an emergency. So again, a simple structure that really makes a big difference in emergency response as well as preparedness. We've also implemented at the school level, schools have been asked to appoint a school safety and security site coordinator. This is going to put one person, specifically in charge of emergency management, emergency preparedness. It's an extra set of eyes outside of administration, but really it's a critical position to have somebody strictly focused on emergency preparation. These staff members and site coordinators will attend monthly meetings where they receive professional development, and then they'll in turn turnkey this to their staff. They'll manage drills, they'll manage compliance issues, they lead the school safety teams and the school safety committees. So again, just another structure that's necessarily doesn't cost any money, but really improves the effectiveness of emergency preparedness and management. Some of the other things that we've added, as Dr. Slayer mentioned, we did increase our security guards. We've recently staffed our NAOP program as well as our Family Welcome Center, so we have full-time guards there now. This week, we've also brought on 2 additional guards as floaters. So this helps us in a few different ways. Number one, we'll be able to deploy them to schools as needed. And this also gives us incredible flexibility in terms of coverages. So if a guard needs off for whatever reason, we're not short-staffed, we have guards to place them, and we're keeping everybody safe. What's some other things? Emergency go bags. We've deployed we'll be deploying emergency go bags at all of our schools. So in terms of emergency preparedness and response, at Norwalk High, it was that first week was concerning, was scary, but at the same time, it really identified and highlighted some of the systems and the structures that need to be improved. And again, through working with the Norwalk Police Department and the school administration, we were able to come up with a bunch of different simple fixes or low-hanging fruit, I should say, to really make us more effective and keep people safer. One of those, again, is this emergency go bag. So in the emergency go bag, we will have radios specifically for first responders. Right now, unfortunately, our system is on an analog system, analog radio communication system. So we cannot communicate with first responders on our radios, and we cannot communicate between schools on our radios. And again, this was something that was identified during that period back in early December around the bomb threats. So there were some positives that came out of that situation. And again, it highlighted a lot of this systems and structures or lack thereof that we need to improve on. Also in this emergency go bags, I mentioned the walkie-talkies. We're gonna have master keys for first responders. There'll be a copy of each school's floor plans in there, and then other important documents. And again, I've worked very closely with Deputy Chief Walsh and Deputy Chief Zecca on exactly what they need in an emergency response situation. Some other structures, we're reviewing student discipline. To this date, we've worked with the Juvenile Review Board to increase referrals. We've been able to step in and really prevent a lot of students that in the past have gone up for expulsion. We've been able to create a stipulation agreement that they would go through the Juvenile Review Board and most importantly, stay in school. So they receive services, and education and so forth. But the most important is they're staying in school. They're not being expelled for any period of time, which is most important. And the results of that are not in quite yet, but I'm confident that's gonna make a big difference on the recidivism of our students. As Dr. Sri mentioned, we're adding cameras to each school. In some situations, we're adding new cameras. In other situations, we're updating from the analog to a digital. In some situations, they're currently a single lens camera, and we could replace those with dual lens as well as quad lens. At very little cost without, running any more lines or anything like that. Just by changing the lens, we could really eliminate a lot of those blind spots and again, make our systems more efficient. I mentioned the radios before. Again, we're on an analog system right now. Part of our capital request was to get money to upgrade our systems in terms of radio communication. When we go to a digital radio communication, we'll be able to not only speak to first responders on the same line, on the same walkie-talkie, but also in between schools. An emergency situation, communication is paramount between all parties, between the school, first responders, and the central office. And I feel strongly, and we feel strongly, that an updated communication system will really help us out in that sense. Additionally, Dr. Stray mentioned the door alarms. Currently, we have about 400 exterior doors throughout the district. We've already gotten quotes on consultants to look at that and tell us what it would be to add, again, a central alarm system. So preventing people from coming in, preventing students from unauthorized, leaving the building. And again, this basic security measures that have a big difference, especially when they're short-staffed. The cameras, the door alarms, communication, these are all things that keep people safe. And as long as somebody's in front of that monitor, it's going to work beautifully. I think that's really about it.
Thank you, Ryan.
Yeah, I'm
So,
I apologize.
I'm going to turn it over to Councilwoman McMurray. If you have
Thank
any
you so much. That was
questions.
very thorough. We really appreciate the update. Does anybody have any questions or comments they want to make? Councilmember Keegan.
Yeah, hi there. I have just a couple of questions. The first is about the use of portable radios. Do you have portable radios, police portables at the high schools?
So that would be part of the emergency bag. So when the first responders come, they'll get NPS radios to be able to.
Now I'm talking about you having a police radio at the school now.
Not currently, no.
Okay. Is that something that we might be able to do, Chief Zecca, or? And I don't want to get into operational stuff, but.
We've been in conversations with the chiefs about connecting or having access to a channel that allows the police department to have access or us to be able to communicate. But that's still in conversation.
But currently what we're looking at is with the go bag, as we arrive on scene, we would get radios to be able to communicate directly with school staff. on
I'm
site.
talking about more so cheap while you're en route. And while you're en route, having direct communication with someone in the school.
Yeah, right now that would be via
Now,
phone.
let's see. We don't have that. That would all be done by telephone.
The
Correct.
telephone.
Okay. And then the last thing, I have one other question. What about the SRO program? And where does that stand right now? For instance, how many trained SROs do we have in this public school system? I know we have staffing issues, but how many of them are actually working?
Sandra, you want to speak to that?
So currently we have 3.
You have 3. Okay, and what is the full complement, Chief? Is that 8?
At one point, we've had as many as 8 or 9.
Okay.
Right now, because of staffing, we have 3, and
Mhm.
they rotate between the schools.
Yeah, my question would be,
Our goal is to get back to the 8 or 9, but we don't
Yeah,
have the
right.
manpower to do that right now.
right. I know that, many of the parents and my constituents are concerned about the number of SROs who are being deployed in the school system. They recognize that they're invaluable, working with the students, the DARE program, et cetera. And they would like to see us return to that, as it was stated, robust SRO program. And I think that we should make that a priority. I don't know how my colleagues feel, but.
Well, Mr. Keegan, what I'll say is that is my priority, and it has
Yeah.
been since I've become the chief. We increased the SRO program when I became the chief with the help of the mayor. We added 2 positions to increase that. Unfortunately, we've had no choice but to make some very difficult decisions. I don't want to make those decisions. It was very hard for me to return some of those SROs back to patrol. But that was something that had to be done, and it's one of those tough decisions that had to be made. And our goal, once we return to staffing, is to get those numbers back up to where we can have the full complement, and hopefully even more, if we can get back up to our 181, which is what our authorized strength is. Right now, we're down, I believe, 17 or 18 positions right now, plus people that are out on long-term disability.
And Mr. Keegan, we do have the DARE program is still, we've been able to come up with some creative ways of having students actually participate in DARE and keep that program alive at all the elementary schools. So that is still up and running.
Thank you.
Councilmember Revelous?
So my whole situation with the phone versus the camera. I'm going to repeat with these SRRs. I think that there's a support that is missed right at the school buses with cops that are there all the time. But my question in supporting SROs, since you don't have them, that's a great way to support that in getting the police officers who are at the bus stops to interact with our kids. That being said, my question is, one of the things, like for your disciplinary tracking, one of the issues that were brought up, which was the suspension and expulsion disproportionately, right? So, and again, to remind our past and our present that Norwalk Acts was based on that premise of our that distinction of our kids being disproportionately expelled and suspended. My question is, how much of that is being resolved before you're using this disciplinary tracker? Because I don't think that the data of whom would actually have these threats happen versus the kids that are actually getting disciplined meet and are the same. So I just want to make sure that's not being falsely directed. And then secondly, I'm just wondering, because I never thought of this before, how much of the efficiency study actually covers security too, that can help in understanding what we should be doing in this part? That's my question.
So in terms of the structures, we have been engaging in professional learning for staff as well as central office personnel around looking at disparities and disproportionality, and also training our principals in tracking behavior patterns from adults that might be leading to certain unwanted outcomes that we have been discussing. The tracker is necessary because it allows us to monitor how these interventions and professional learning opportunities are reflecting and manifesting themselves in practice. So with the tracker, we're able to see where if there's recidivism, where patterns of suspension are happening, who is being suspended, by what frequency, are there patterns in certain buildings that are happening more frequently than others, are there role models to follow, and what can we learn from those? So we are creating these dashboards to be able to look at the data, to look at how the data is shifting as a result of the supports that we're implementing in the system at large.
Okay,
Councilmember Ayers, do you have a question?
the efficiency. Okay.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Revoluce, did you have a follow-up question? I apologize.
No, it was just, well,
In terms of the efficiency
the-
study, that wasn't part of the efficiency study.
that's not, okay, because that just hit me, like, thank you, I appreciate it.
Mhm.
I apologize. Councilmember Ayers?
Thank you. My question is just an extension of something that was brought forth in regards to discipline of students. I am in support of keeping the students in the building as much as possible, but sometimes there may be an issue that's of extreme importance that a child has to be taken out of the building for the safety of staff and other students. So in this new thinking that the Norwalk Public Schools is going through in a lens of safety, are we just not expelling children, even if the, I don't want to say crime, because that's not what it is, even if the
If the incident,
thank you for the language, if the incident warrants extreme concern. I've had several constituents that have had children that have had anxiety attacks and different things based on the lockdowns that were necessary for the safety. And I was just wondering what is the distinction? Like, are we just not, expulsion is just not what we're doing, or how do we handle that in a safety perspective?
well, expulsions are continuing to happen. The question is, why are they happening, and what are the supports and interventions being provided to students when they're in a situation that merits an expulsion, and making sure that when we get to the point where we're talking about an expulsion, it's because it's an egregious act that really needs to be handled in a different way, because it really compromised the safety and well-being of either the individual child or others. But really thinking about in the situation where the child is being expelled, what are the learning experiences that child is having during that time, and making sure that child is not then placed in a predicament when they have to return back to the school environment. They have regressed rather than have had the social emotional support and academic support necessary to be able to continue and reacclimate in an effective manner. So it's more about really thinking about what is the current structure, what are the modifications we need to do so that it doesn't become an ongoing act. For instance, we've been in conversation with Lamont Daniels, and we're working in partnership. Dr. McBride is going to be leading this work, looking at our juvenile detention and looking at who are the students that are entering this program, what are the things that we need to do so that when they're returning back to the schools, that we know how to well support them and accommodate their needs when they're going through the process of reentry, so that the whole conversation of school, the school to prison pipeline needs that's where it happens, that's where it starts. How do we set up processes to prevent them from really happening the way, you know, nationally these statistics have been rolling out? And I think we have a great opportunity partnering with the center, with Lamont, and also really rethinking how we're looking at expulsions to really stop some of the patterns that have been happening historically throughout our nation and in our city.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. And I just had one more additional question. Safety in regards to traffic. What is, if any, the perspective or the work that the Board of Education is doing with traffic around our schools? It's a city issue. It's not just a Board of Ed issue, but particularly in pickup and drop off times, where I have seen some stuff. I've seen some really, really dangerous and crazy things. And it, particularly with the shortage of the SROs, is there any plans, or are you looking at any type of safety measures to implement doing pick-off and drop-off times?
So our principals have been phenomenal at bringing in or bringing out additional personnel to support with the drop off and pickup. But I have to say that NPD has been also phenomenal. Even though we might have a limited number of SROs, they constantly deploy other officers during pickup and drop off time to help with traffic control and to help us regulate a lot of the challenges that we've been facing around that particular process. We've also have had, if we see a pattern where there's an issue or it's been highlighted for us as a traffic pattern that needs to be further addressed, and we've had our relationship with NPD has been so strong that they will work with us in finding ways to mitigate hot spots that we encounter throughout the year.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. One more, I just want to have you, just a suggestion. There is some really great work and some really great engineers in the city's traffic and mobility department that has been very insightful in traffic patterns around schools. So I would just give a friendly suggestion of going forward, maybe having a conversation, because some of the things that they come up with is absolutely surprising. And that might be able to help in the overall traffic flow at different schools.
I know the team has had conversations with them, and yes, and we continue to, because their input is really important for us to make, especially with bus routes. We really count on their expertise to help us think through the work. Thank you for that.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all for the update. I'm going to ask a question that relates to safety, not directly with what we're talking about with the lockdowns and everything after that, but with what Council Member Ayers talked about with the anxiety of the students. And I know we've heard from constituents and friends that mental health obviously is more important than ever for our young people. Where are you going to, and I know you've heard me talk about this at a Board of Ed meeting, but are you going to, in this new committee, have a scope that also includes mental health, things like suicide prevention, policies, against bullying, maybe even a student suicide prevention policy? Because I know that those are also related, but very important, and it'd be great to hear from you all what your plans are around those specific issues in the next, I suppose, year or so with this committee. Thank you.
So within this committee, we're talking about elements of that work, but not at the level that you are describing. We have a team of folks that are looking at this component, and it really lies under the school guidance team and looking at what the work that we need to do to really improve. We have formed alongside Lamont Daniels a committee that is going to really focus on the SEL component of supporting our students, particularly how do we enhance supports given the limited resources that we currently have. So with the partnership, with these partnerships and some of our community-based organizations, we've added an additional school counselor at both high schools, at each high school. And we're looking to find creative ways in which we can bring in additional supports for our students, because one of the things that came out of some of the challenge we had with the lockdowns, and we had our partners come together and support our guidance team during that time. A lot of our students felt that they needed more opportunities to have conversations, but not only opportunities for our students, but also the adults servicing our children, because they've had a really traumatic 18 plus months through this pandemic. And sometimes we think the adults are okay, and the adults also need support. And what we learned from a lot of these conversations was the need to really not only provide supports for the students, but also the adults. We had an initial meeting already with this coalition of organizations to talk about how to effectively develop therapeutic interventions and also proactive intervention rather than reactive interventions in supporting our students. And we started to form an array of like portfolios of support across the organization that go and extend beyond the school system. And I'll use an example, Norwalk Community Health Center. Oh my God, I lost the name for a minute. Norwalk Community Health Center is offering teleservice family therapy for a certain number of hours for students and families in our district. And we're looking to see throughout the different community-based organizations, what do they currently offer and what could they set aside specifically to support our families and our children so that they get the supports that they need that extend beyond the school day, right? Because we don't have the capacity to do it all. So we are looking at through this task force or consortium of folks, how we can extend services and supports for our students. So we're kind of creating a separate group because it's an expanded group of people throughout the community. And our goal is through the family center, have different organizations coming in and scaffolding opportunities so that our parents are aware and also have access to these resources that are throughout the city at large.
Thank you, Dr. Estrella. That's very helpful to get that sense and also what you all did. And I know I talked with Mr. Daniels about the work he did, which syncs up exactly with the ongoing work. Just briefly, I don't know if you can speak to this directly, and I know this may be more appropriate for Board of Ed members, but is there an appetite and interest? Do you think it's an imperative to work on a bullying policy in the district, a suicide prevention policy as well? What are your thoughts on that?
So this cohort of folks will be supporting the further development. We have a bullying prevention policy already, and it's a matter of continuing to enhance and inform. So through this work, we will continue to expand and elevate those components as well.
I ask because of the data that you all, with the surveys you did with the Norwalk partnership and how that just actually presented to this committee last term, just highlighted this great need. So I know you have, a lot of families that would like to see that, and council members like myself who would be very happy to help however we can. Thank you.
And the other thing is bringing in the supports that our students need, because also around the LGBTQ conversation that we've been having, particularly making sure that every child in our school knows that there's somebody that they can go to and have a conversation, or that there's an adult in the building that has an awareness and training in how to have conversations with students that want to express certain feelings, ideas, or thoughts, is also something that we've been working on, and something we presented to our board. So I can ask my team to pull out those clips so that we can send to the council, so that you can see some of the presentations we have conducted to our board. And you can see some of the things that we're trying to do. We're launching this LGBTQ initiative. We had over 40 guidance counselors trained around supporting students, and just having the language and understanding and how to have productive conversations that make students feel comfortable, but also feel welcome in our schools and by all adults in our school environment. And our goal is eventually to provide the training to almost all of our staff members. But obviously, because of capacity, we have to start small and expand over time.
That's great. I appreciate that very much. It'd be great to
I
see.
want to, oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I just gonna say it'd be great to see the clips, and I appreciate that work. Thank you.
I'll work with the team to make those accessible to you. They're public, but I'll make sure you get them.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge that Councilmember Goldstein joined our meeting quite a while ago, and I didn't want to interrupt anybody, and he also has a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Obviously there's a lot happening here. There are a lot of different ideas, more than suggestions. I mean, initiatives here. I guess I want to step out a little bit on timing, because we are in the middle of the school year right now. In terms of parent and student confidence, what are steps that you are working on that can be ready, essentially operational now? What is the stuff that you're planning on doing by the end of the school year? What are of these items, which ones are you essentially working to rectify, complete by the start of next school year? I know Mr. Harold had a number of different items, action items, but I guess I want to just give parents and students a sense of what they can expect and when.
So a lot of what Mr. Harold was articulating are things that are already in progress, and our goal is by the end of the school year that either they're in place or they're ready to be launched for the 22-23 academic school year. Similarly, with the behavior intervention plan and modifications, our goal is that we will have a completed tool before the end of the school year, so that it can go to the policy committee and then to the full board before the start of the academic school year. In terms of the supports and conversations that we were talking about, these have been ongoing and already happening. In terms of services being provided, services have already started. The piece that we're looking at is how do we continue to expand and build on the portfolio so that we have additional services to provide our families that extend beyond the schools. In terms of the LGBTQ component, we've already presented to the board on this component, and the training has already started. There is one person at each school already trained to be that point of contact to our students. The work now is how our continual expansion of the training, so that more individuals in the building have the capacity to have the conversation and also have the adequate training to do it well. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess the takeaway, and tell me if this is the wrong takeaway, is that and I realize that a lot of this is already in progress, but it seems that most of what has been discussed is going to be operational no later than the beginning of the 2022-2023 academic year, but are probably not going to be active during the 21-22 school year. Is that correct?
That's incorrect. Okay. Many of these things are already have taken effect.
Okay.
The goal for 22-23 is that we will start the school year having all of these processes, unlike this year, because we've been learning. As you know, I've only been here for a year and a half. There's been a lot of learning that has taken place, and COVID has not made that process any easier. So as we continue to unfold the elements of the strategic plan and those elements that have been elevated for us to focus on, we've also continued to assess our safety processes that we needed to further look at, and we've been enhancing those as well. So it has been an ongoing process. Our goal is that for 22-23, we will start the year off with all of these elements in place, but many of these are already taking place in the 21-22 academic school year.
Great, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments? I want to thank
Chairman?
Dr. Estrella. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to acknowledge that our principals are here. We have Principal Woods, Principal Roberts, we have Principal Parham. Oh my God, Julie, I never say your last name. I'm sorry. Principal Amaker is not here because her father is not well, but she would have been here if she could. But I just wanted to acknowledge that they're here, just in case any council member has any questions directly to them as leaders.
Thank you so much. Does anybody have any further questions for any of the panelists before we move on? I want to thank Dr. Estrella and the entire team. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilman Keegan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair McMurray. And in response to Councilperson Johnson's reference to bullying, are we familiar with Public Act 11-232 of the Connecticut Public Acts General Statutes concerning bullying?
Yes, and our policy is guided by that.
Okay. Because that's, I guess that's 10 years old, and it indicates that training will be provided to every employee. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
And Councilman Keegan, if I may, Dr. Estrella, we just recently actually communicated to all the school principals just a revisit of that act, and gave them a specific protocol for investigations and how it is that we're supposed to be conducting investigations and the communications that goes out. So we actually just very recently, it's very timely that you bring this up, had that communication go out to our school principals just as a refresher for that. And then bullying will be also part of the discussions that we do have with the safety task force in terms of our own response to bullying and a tiered system to actually try to prevent bullying. So bullying prevention is something that's not necessarily in the act, but that we're also looking at as a task force.
Thank you. That's
Of course.
it's a problem that I know that we're all aware of, and thank you for doing everything you can to try to do what's best for the kids.
Absolutely.
Are there any further questions or comments before we move on? All right, seeing none, I want to thank Dr. Estrella and the entire team that came out this evening. Thank you for your time and continuing to keep our kids safe. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for everything you all do. Stay safe. Good night.
Good night.
So next, we're going to move on to new business. Under the police department, we have number 1, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute any and all agreements and other documents necessary to apply for, accept, and/or receive federal or state grant funds for any grant program which will be utilized by the Norwalk Police Department for public health and safety purposes annually until hereafter revoked by the Common Council, to the extent that the program does not require a municipal funding match. Number 2, I'm going to keep going. Number 2, authorize the purchasing agent Sharon Connors to execute the purchase order on behalf of the police department to MHQ Inc. under the state contract Connecticut 12PSX0194 for the purchase of 10 2022 Ford Utility Interceptor Hybrid Police Vehicles for the amount not to exceed $367,976, account as noted. And 3, authorize the mayor, Harry W. Willing, to execute an agreement with Fleet Auto Supply under RFP project number 4123 for the upfit of police vehicles each year for an amount not to exceed $200,000 per year for an initial term of 3 years with 2 optional 1-year renewals, account number as noted. Deputy Chief Zecca, would you like to speak to any of this or to, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. We're going to start with the first one. I'm getting ahead of myself. I apologize. So let me reread number 1. Authorize the mayor, Harry W. Willing, to execute any and all agreements and other documents necessary to apply for, accept, and or receive federal or state grant funds for any grant program which will be utilized by the Norwalk Police Department for public health and safety purposes annually until hereafter revoked by the Common Council to the extent that the program does not require a municipal funding match. Do I have a motion? Diana Revelous, Councilmember Revelous. Do I have any discussion on this? Councilmember Goldstein.
I just want to make, I want to get this defined clearly, especially because we're in a public meeting and because the language is remarkably broad. So, you know, could you just either Chief Kahalik or Deputy Chief Zecca, just because this is a public meeting and the public can listen to this, just explain what this means.
I can explain it, but I'm going to defer to Deputy Chief Zecca because she came up with the idea, which I agreed with and I thought was a good one. So I'll let her explain why she came up with this.
So, and I have to defer a little bit too. It was actually Corporation Counsel who I worked with on this and determined that this would be a good way to proceed as we have some trouble with certain of our yearly grants, like our Justice Assistance Grant and certain grants that we get every year that there's no cost share to. The timeframes are very short. So, and we need the mayor to sign these grants, and in order, so we're constantly having trouble with trying to get them to council to get the approval and then actually still be able to apply in time. This only affects grants that there is no cost share on. So, you know, anything that there would be a cost share on, obviously we would come through committee as we normally do. The idea is to try to expedite these routine matters that so that we don't lose an opportunity purely because we can't get the mayor's signature in time.
And how often does this happen in a fiscal year?
So there's a couple of standard grant, like there's the Edward Burns grant. There's a DUI grant. There's a distracted driving grant. So there's probably, I would say, 3 to 6 grants in a total year at most.
Sorry, I saw Nicole had her hand raised, so I'm gonna.
Yes, Councilmember Ayers.
I did. So if I'm understanding you correct, it's based on timing. You want to push this forward because it's a timing situation, and having it go through council is just, it's a timing thing. Am I understanding?
Mostly, yes.
Correctly?
Yes, exactly. So it's to apply for and get funds that aren't going to cost the city any money, but we are constantly running into because a lot of times there's a very, very short time frame to be able to apply and accept. So
just a follow-up question. Sorry, Deputy Chief Zecca. Just a follow-up question. You start off saying that these are yearly or annual grants that you normally
some of them are.
So if they're not new grants, but something that you consistently go through, wouldn't you know the deadlines prior to?
No, because there's usually not a tremendous amount of time between when they get announced and when they're due. And we can't do anything with them until they're announced. They're not all annual. There are like the last grant we just brought in front of council was something that hadn't normally come up. It was a justice assistance grant, but it wasn't a normal annual grant. So it's all of these grants, the time framing on them every year is rather short. You can't write the grant when you don't have the specific information. We're using them for different things every year. So I can't, unfortunately, I can't fully get ahead of it.
No, I
'Cause
get the actual writing of the grant and the paperwork of the grant. I get that part, but my question more of is every grant has an expiration date. So you know that the grant is going to end. Even if there is a very short, say a 30-day window for a grant to be issued and given out. I think I'm struggling to understand. They're not coming out of the air. You might not know it's March 1st, but you know that the grant has expired and another grant is gonna come.
No, so it's not a matter of one grant expiring and then us renewing a grant. They're actually an individual solicitation each year. And then so the JAG grant in particular, we have no idea how much money we're going to get allocated, et cetera. So we can't actually plan for that. And we know in general when they might come out, but I can't put an authorization through that I don't know when or what the amount is going to be, or because they change a bit each year. It's not a renewal of a grant.
And when you say not a terrible long amount of time, I mean, is it 30 days, 2 weeks? What is it usually?
There's times when it's 30 days. As a matter of fact, the last grant we just put through, I want to say it was about 3 weeks.
Okay.
They're normally maybe 30 days, 2 months, but which becomes very difficult to write a grant, get it in front of subcommittee, get it in front of council, and then get it signed and submitted in time.
Right.
And, so the JAG grant, we're talking usually probably somewhere around $30,000 or $35,000 a year. Our DUI grant is roughly around $50,000 a year. We're not talking huge money, but it makes a substantial impact in our operations.
Councilmember Alterman, your hand was up first.
Thank you. I just had maybe it's an obvious question, I'm not sure, but has council ever denied a grant that was applied for?
No.
I'm guessing no. Okay, I assumed the answer was no, so thank you. I just was curious.
No, normally we don't to be honest, normally we're not able to go through the subcommittee. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. Generally, the chairman of the subcommittee has been kind enough to forward it directly to council without the subcommittee meeting. And then the council then would have to approve it at the next meeting. Sometimes that meeting, we may have missed it. It might be another 2 weeks because the way the schedule goes. But we've never had a grant where there's no, actually, I don't believe there's a grant where there's no, even where there's some funding from the city, I don't believe I've ever had a grant denied. Even back when I was a detective in 19 whatever, writing grants for the city, I don't believe we've ever had a grant denied by the council.
Well,
it's always been a pretty perfunctory process and just a matter that the mayor cannot sign it without the council's approval.
Sure. To me, it sounds like a good idea. I think my only hesitation would be if there is any history of any grants that were perceived as not equitable or any kind of something like that, that would be an undertone in it. But otherwise, it seems like a good idea.
Councilmember Keegan.
And that was going to be my point, Madam Chair, that I can understand that the police department's position that the grants come and the process may be a little cumbersome. But I'm sure that at our meetings, they'll announce which grants were applied for. So it's not like this information is not going to be made known to the public, that we're going to know about it anyway. It's just the process, right, Chief?
Yeah, in fact, we can create a process of forwarding the information to the council at the time the grants applied for, to say, just, be aware this is going through based on X, and here's what it's for.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with that. If we are being asked to approve something like that now.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments about, oh, I'm sorry, I don't know who was first. Was it Councilman Burnett? Okay, Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question was a little more global in nature in that, does this approach change across the board for all grants? Because as the chair of the Finance and Claims Committee, I have seen similar situations where there's been a short runway to approve a grant, and we've had to do some, last minute changes. So if and I have no concerns over the approach with the grants coming through the police department, but I'm more global question. Are we changing our approach to handling grants across the board for the city of Norwalk?
Now, with this authorization, the intent is just to change these kind of more routine grants with short timing for the police department, to ensure that we can continue to get the funding that we're looking for without, based on time constraints. So it's just these grants that do not have a financial commitment, contribution from the city.
So Madam Chair, then a follow-up question, the direction that you received from the corporate counsel, are they suggesting that we can follow this approach with other departments that bring grants forward to the various committees of the Common Council?
Not that I'm aware of, no. But I think it's something that we might want to follow up on. Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on point made by Councilmember Burnett and Keegan. First off, I can't imagine, though I'm not sure, Deputy Chief Zecca, any of your grants go through any other committees, or is it just this committee that you all have grants come through?
As far as I'm aware, it's usually this committee. That I don't recall any other committees I've brought a grant through.
Okay, cool. Okay, that was my recollection, but I know you knew better. So, and then to follow up, I think Councilmember Keegan's point is just spot on about making sure there's a process, even though we're removing, an authorization more or less on our part, because as I recall from the burn justice that was at the DOJ grant we just put through, like last year, there was a bit of conversation in this committee about the use of it for policing in certain neighborhoods in the city. And so I think that equity piece, back to Councilmember Heidi Alterman's point, is right on. I mean, I assume what this means, it says is until hereafter revoked by the Common Council. So I can't imagine, but just to kind of pull that thread, as long as we have a place to talk about what, say, the grant would be used for, there's a mechanism for us, right, to make sure we're all on the same page if we're hearing things from constituents about certain things that may be traced back to a grant that we want some oversight on. I know that sounds nebulous, but I hope you kind of, am I making myself a little clear? Maybe not, I don't know. A little. I see some people nodding. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, if we start hearing that some of the things that the grants are being used for are not, we're getting some feedback from constituents. Is there a way we can talk about that with you at a meeting, even though you're not authorized by us anymore?
Well, I'll just offer that if your constituents have any concerns regarding the police department, please contact me and let's discuss it, regardless of whether it's a grant or whatever. We always want to hear any concerns that are being raised.
I get it. I just oftentimes these meetings become the place where that happens for us, so that's just what I'm thinking, I appreciate that.
Well,
Chief.
I'll be honest with you. I've had better discussions and more in-depth conversations when we're not in meetings because there's a lot more time and, people can be a little more frank. But we're happy to do whatever you choose.
Cool. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Goldstein.
One last quick question. In the actual language here, it says until to the extent the program does not, quote, require a municipal funding match. But the language that you've been saying is that if it requires any contribution at all from the city of Norwalk. I just wanted to make sure that was what I was hearing is correct.
Well,
I guess my question is, does this only apply in situations where it requires the same amount of money or any amount of money?
No. A match is any money. Like, so we
Okay.
used to get some grants, like the DUI grant used to be a 25% match. Like the state covered 75% and the city had to pitch in 25%. So any grant where where the city would have to be contributing money to would, if in the grant language, there's a cost share, is probably the better way to put it, a cost share to the city, then that something with a cost share would come before committee.
Great, thank you.
Does anyone else have, Councilmember Keegan.
Yeah, I just have one question for Chief Kahalik or Chief Seca. Are we in any hurry for this motion or approval?
I'm sorry, are we in any hurry?
Any hurry to approve this change?
I don't know that there's a grant pending. I think this was a generic thing, but I'll defer to Sue
Yeah.
because she handles the grants.
Again, I've been in discussion with the law department for quite a while. They actually drafted this language and it was, really based on their, it causes them some issues too, as we're trying to rush things through and then it's more hurried. And so it causes kind of a scheduling and time crunch for them as well, when we're having to wait to get through committee for it to get to them. So it was at their recommendation that I brought it to this meeting today. Kind of the idea is to get it in front of you and get it, get this done before the next grant comes up.
Yeah, my concern was brought up by our colleague, Councilman Burnett, in that will this affect other grants for other committees? So if I may, I'd like to make a motion that we table it until next month so that we get an opportunity to maybe discuss this further with the law department. Not necessarily in response to the police department and your request, but just other committees and other departments within the city.
Okay, the motion to table is on.
I second it.
Thank you. All those in favor of tabling the item, please say aye. And all of those opposed, please say aye. And anybody who abstains. All right, the motion to table passes. So we'll be discussing this further in the future. Item number 2 is authorize the purchasing agent Sharon Connors to execute the purchase order on behalf of the police department to MHQ Inc. under the state contract CT12PSX0194 for the purchase of 10 2022 Ford Utility Interceptor hybrid police vehicles for the amount not to exceed $367,976, account as noted. Does anybody have any discussion on this, or Deputy Chief Seca or Chief Kowalik, would you like to discuss this one?
I respectfully think you need a motion first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I call for a motion. Councilmember Revolus. The wheels are falling off the cart, guys. Sorry. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead now. Chief Kowalik or Deputy Chief Zeka, is there anything you'd like to say about this motion?
Yeah, it's basically, this is our standard vehicle purchase. Each year, we have a schedule of vehicle purchasing to replace our fleet, which is a 24/7 fleet. We don't have the luxury of having vehicles that are used only for 1 or 2 shifts a day. Unfortunately, many years back, probably 10 or 15 years ago, we were short receiving vehicles and our fleet became very old. So we were forced to then play catch up, and that's what we've been doing for the last number of years. And we're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. The idea is eventually we would not have a 24/7 fleet. Our patrol vehicles would be able to be used for 8 hours and rest for 8 hours and then go back, and they would last longer, but we're still not there yet. So this is to replace 10 of our frontline patrol vehicles, which then get recycled back as spares and extra vehicles, or get repainted as unmarked vehicles for the other divisions. Regarding the hybrid question, several years ago, I asked my staff to look at purchasing hybrid vehicles. I noticed that around the country, there were some departments that were purchasing hybrids. We then did some research. We found that there were very few agencies that were doing it, and it was very little literature on the value of them, as well as the repair records and dependability, et cetera. So we waited. About 2 years ago, 2.5, 3 years ago, we then looked at it again and we saw that some agencies, NYPD, New York City Police Department, for one, had started using them, and they do a lot of research on them. Some other agencies in the state, some smaller agencies in the state bought 1 or 2 of these to try. We reached out to them and we reached out to NYPD after they had them for a year to see what their thoughts were. They all gave them the thumbs up that they were definitely something that we should do. They had no issues or no additional issues. So we decided that now is a good time, based on the input from the community and from some others, that we should be moving towards hybrids, which we agreed with. So now we feel it's appropriate to start moving towards hybrid vehicles. We also feel it's appropriate to go with this includes the extended warranty on them. So if there are issues, the dealership, the Ford Motor is responsible for the repairs on the initial use of the vehicles. Basically, these are the hybrids, meaning when they're idling, they use their battery. When they're driving, they use the engine. So they do save a lot. NYPD has saved a lot on gas using the hybrids, because police vehicles do idle quite a bit, especially in the hot summer days and the cold winter days. Now that the officers carry Narcan and other equipment, they can't let the vehicles get very cold or very hot. So they have to leave the vehicles running basically almost the entire shift, unless you're dealing with a very temperate day. So that's kind of where we are. As far as a full electric fleet, it's a nice idea. However, you're talking about numerous charging stations to be installed at the police department. We need a capital expenditure to do that. There are really no full electric vehicles I'm aware of that are for full-time 24/7 patrol use. The article that was emailed regarding Westport noted in the article that it was not a regular police duty vehicle. It was a specialty vehicle that they were employing as the Tesla. We'd be happy to get additional funding to purchase a Tesla or similar electric vehicle and put that into our traffic unit or something like that. But again, we have very, very little room, because most of our vehicle expense goes towards our frontline patrol 24/7 fleet. And that's what we're looking at here again right now.
Does anybody have any questions or comments? Councilmember Goldstein.
So I kind of think we should split this into 2 camps here. One, let's just talk about the hybrid vehicles first. In your discussions with NYPD and other departments, and obviously through this, through the purchasing process here, what is the average miles per gallon on these vehicles? The Interceptor is like akin to the Ford Escape, if I'm not mistaken. Explorer. So
Explorer.
I guess sort of what do you estimate would be the overall cost savings by going hybrid as opposed to gas? And just sort of step that out. And then the electric vehicle thing, I think, is the next discussion, but I see what you're saying about the additional capital expenditure. So sort of a little more on the hybrid and sort of what you see as the potential cost savings for investing in 10 hybrids here.
To be honest with you, I don't know what our annual cost savings will be. I'll ask Sue if she has any idea what that might be.
I have not recently calculated.
And I'm looking for an estimate. I'm not really asking for, a pinpoint number, because you couldn't possibly do that. I just didn't know if that was something that was a consideration.
I wouldn't want to estimate because we've never had them. And having 10 of our vehicles for the amount of use, I couldn't estimate. I could only base it. NYPD saved tens of thousands, but they're dealing with a huge fleet. And the other departments that I've spoken to had 1 or 2 vehicles that saved in a year $1,500 or something like that. So, but they don't get the 24/7 use that we do either. Most of those smaller agencies have a fleet that can rest for 8 or 12 hours or 16 hours a day. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. So this would be our test to kind of see where the savings comes, and then determine going forward, whether it was worth it. I think it will be, because the difference in price between a hybrid and the traditional Explorer. Sue, I know you have the exact number.
It was only a few $1,000s. It was.
Yeah, it's a couple $1,000 difference.
Councilmember Alterman.
Thank you. I just had a quick question regarding grants. Is there anybody working on securing grants for electric vehicles, even if it is just one that the city could be testing or using in special circumstances?
That I would have to ask our city grants coordinator. We have no one that specifically is focused 100% on grants. Our grant person does multitude of things and does very little research on grants. Unfortunately, doesn't have the time. We have discussed it.
I understand that, yeah.
But that's something I could speak to the grants coordinator for the city to see if there's something. I'm not aware, just looking around at other agencies, I haven't seen anyone get a grant for electric vehicles, but I'm not saying there are none out there. I don't know. I haven't seen anything.
I can look into it too. Thank you.
Councilmember Ayers.
Yes, Chief, if you could just explain to me, if with the purchase of these new hybrid cars, will there be any change in the way you have to upkeep or care for them? And this is why I'm asking. My grandma has a hybrid car and she got stuck on the side of the road, and we called AAA because we thought it was her battery. AAA could not jump her. That was one incident. The second incident, she went to a local oil place to get her oil changed. She went under something that had like a lot of metal stuff, and it shut the car down. So is the police department prepared to do the maintenance for a hybrid car? Because it could be a little different than just the regular cars that they're used to doing the maintenance on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Sue, go ahead if you want.
It's the Public Works is who works on our vehicles. And they have said that the routine maintenance, they will still be able to do. Certain of the larger jobs would need to go to the dealer. But right now, we're already sending our vehicles to the dealer for any larger work because, well, one, because we bought extended warranties. So because we were having some issues. So the warranty work all gets done at the dealer anyway. And there's only right now one mechanic that's assigned to work on the police vehicles. So the wait for some of the work would lay up our cars for too long. So we've started going to the dealer more often anyway. But yes, there certain of the work absolutely will have to go to the dealer.
Okay, thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I also believe that other vehicles, not particularly to the police department, but in other departments in the city also have hybrid vehicles. Is that correct? I believe Public Works does.
Yes. So ultimately, we had been hearing from the council for the last few years, every discussion we've had kind of over our vehicles, we've been having people tell us to go to hybrids. The city wants to go to the hybrids. So I don't know exactly who has hybrids within the city, but I do believe there's quite a few.
Thank you. Councilmember Najelski Eichner.
Thank you, and I appreciate you letting me jump in, even though I'm not on the committee. But I wanted to follow up on this point of the electric vehicles, largely because I was really surprised in doing some research on them, that they seem to have been used very successfully and with really startlingly high cost savings in a number of police departments across the country. So I was initially curious for climate reasons. I really appreciate that the department is engaging with the concerns of the council on that. But then I was really startled to find out from a couple of the articles I read about departments using them, that they have much lower maintenance requirements because the engine stops when there's no braking, so they use less brake. And they also don't have to have oil changes or other sort of routine maintenance because there's no functioning parts of the engines. So the city of Fremont, for instance, reported that their electric vehicles were in service 27 more days annually than their regular vehicles. So what I initially thought was sort of an environmental issue is now actually feeling like, and the other departments have discovered that the increase in costs more than pays for itself over the course of less than a year, and then they are actually recouping savings from having their electric vehicles. So I am wondering whether there is, and I certainly understand, it would be a major project. It would be a major capital investment. We would have to think about charging stations. It would definitely require reconfiguring some things. And I do think that I really hear the concerns you're raising about a 24-hour fleet. And I'm not sure that any of the police department examples I've examined so far have been using theirs for a 24-hour fleet. But I do think that, honestly, from a fiscal standpoint, as much as an environmental standpoint, it's actually sounding like this is something that really should be investigated, and that there might be value in holding off for a year and doing a planned, larger sort of capital purchase that is a sort of conversion to electric, rather than making sort of kind of a continuing sort of set of purchases that aren't necessarily the right purchase for the department. So I just really want to put that out there. Like I said, it was not the result I expected to find. And I am curious, to know what sort of and I recognize again the limits of the department's capacity, but what we can do as a council to help really investigate the possibility of going full electric. Again, given the potential for long-term cost savings, which could actually underwrite the capital investment costs, or get a return on the capital investment costs that exceed the actual capital investment.
Go ahead, currently, I would say that we haven't really spent much time investigating full electric vehicles as we were looking at the hybrids and trying to move toward the hybrid vehicle. So from the police department standpoint, I know at least I have not researched the electric vehicles, and I would be concerned with holding off on a purchase of our current 10 cars, because that would further deteriorate our fleet if we had this whole year that we don't purchase any vehicles.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. So I will try to be succinct, though that often is not my strong suit, but I first want to say thank you, because I was one of those council members last year saying, when we got the request for more gas vehicles, like, hey, can we do hybrid? And it was, the question was, it was baked into the capital budget as such. And so the fact that you're all coming now just with 10 hybrids, I just want to say thank you for that, because that shows that you're listening to, like, I think that you're getting the sense that there's the need out there, not only from people, but for the, the cost savings, the environmental impact and all that. So I really want to thank you. I also then am going to be that person a year later to say, is there any way we can think about, maybe to Councilmember Alterman's point, getting a 1 or 2 electric vehicles just to see how they are in terms of for usefulness for you, knowing we don't have the charging infrastructure, back to Councilmember Nagelski Eichner's point. That's where I'm getting stuck on this. Like, I really want our entire municipal fleet, including, as much of our public safety as is possible to go electric. We don't have that charging infrastructure, and we need to make capital investments. And so I wonder how many, this is my question finally, is there 10 cars every year? I'm trying to remember, like how many, so 10 cars a year. Okay. So is there capital, and maybe we'll get to this in the capital budget overview, but are you going to make another capital request for additional fleet vehicles for next year? Is that fair to assume?
Yes, our capital budget request for next year is 10 marked vehicles and 3 unmarked.
Okay. And would it be possible for even a couple of those vehicles to be electric potentially? Is that something you think you all could maybe do, given that we have a little runway here, or would that require? Oh, go ahead, Chief, sorry.
What I will say is, for the patrol vehicles, for the marked cars, no. There's right now, because of the fact that we're playing catch up, we don't have vehicles again that can be laid up to charge. All our vehicles the frontline vehicles run 24/7. Unfortunately, even last year or the year before, generally we don't get the number of vehicles that we asked for in the capital budget. They usually get cut by a couple patrol vehicles. So we've always been playing catch up. In the unmarked vehicles, that's something we could look at, depending on what the use of that vehicle is and the ability to recharge it and what's available around us, et cetera. So we'd be happy to look at that, going forward.
That would be amazing, Chief, because I'm just thinking, like, it probably needs to be upfitted regardless, right? Even if it's an electric vehicle used in parade or minimal crowd control or sitting outside a school or something like that.
No, the unmarked vehicles they're not upfitted. Those are administrative cars. The patrol vehicles are the upfitted vehicles, and those are fully outfitted to be frontline. The cars that you see working, the schools and things like that, are not frontline vehicles. Those are vehicles passed down that were frontline vehicles that have since been, they have 70,000 miles, and they're then cycled back to being part-time vehicles. We have not had the luxury to have part-time vehicles that are new. They're all the part-time vehicles are secondhand, so to speak. The only new vehicles that are not frontline vehicles are some and very few administrative cars. And again, last year, those were cut from the capital budget. So we got no unmarked cars last year. So we're always dealing with, trying to play catch up. But again, we'll be happy to look at the unmarked side to see if there's something we can do there.
That would be fabulous, because I think that, we're so responsive to the request for hybrid vehicles. Literally in a year, now we're seeing 10. So I'm grateful for that. But I'd also love to just, for more than just my own edification, like just to keep moving forward together, like what could that look like if you all could have an administrative EV to try this out? And just my last question would be, what's the life on these cars, given that they're new, they're 2022s, right? So how long do you think these hybrids would be in service for you all? Knowing the wear and tear.
We try to, provided that they haven't had, major damage or other, major functional issues, we keep our cars as long as they run. Basically, we have cars that are 10, 12, 14 years old. Actually, I think we have some vehicles that might even be 15 or more years old that are not everyday vehicles, but they're still in the fleet. Again, we cycle all those cars back down until they basically don't run. Or I'll be honest with you, one of our K9 vehicles that's being replaced this year, the vehicles, because of delays again in purchasing and upfits, one of our K9 officers drives a Crown Victoria that has a hole in the floor. That's going through, you can see the ground in the driver's side. So, he's due for a car. And his car is being upfitted now, but it took several years because of, again, the delay is is incredible. By the time we budget it, it gets approved. We go out to bid or the state contract, it gets approved for purchase. They get ordered, there's a delay in buying it, then the upfit delay, then the company has to upfit the vehicles. It's, again, these vehicles that we're talking about today were in last year's budget.
Right.
So,
Just get it.
we're always 6 months or so, 8 months behind, trying to get things done.
I also just will say this, and I appreciate that I hope that we will see some federal incentives, maybe even some subsidies, I don't know about grants, that will make this more like for us, right, to go electric even further. Like, I'm hopeful that these hybrids even can have some return. I mean, maybe not, hybrids aren't like the cutting edge anymore, but hopefully maybe there'll be some incentives for us as a city to go electric and we can take advantage of that. So I appreciate you all in what you're doing to try forward. So thank you very much.
Councilmember Goldstein.
I just want to very briefly sort of add in and say, I think that the hybrids are obviously a positive step. I agree with what my fellow council members have said about using, and I understand that there's a catch-up period where, or a catch-up need that we do need to outfit the fleet with, cars that are working and that hopefully can be environmentally sustainable. But I also think the need to catch up is also an opportunity to move forward. And I think that, when we're talking about an acquisition like this a year from now, and this is something that I certainly commit to work with you on, and I think a number of us want to do the same, first of all, figure out, and I think we can work on data collection methods to figure out what the cost savings are on these hybrids, because I think we need data in order to understand what's working, what's not. Was this actually a worthwhile purchase in terms of cost savings? And then the second part is figuring out what the capital investment would be in terms of charging stations, what an electric fleet would look like, and that would work for the Norwalk Police Department. That's something that I absolutely would love to work with you on. I'm sure there are many others on here and throughout the council who would like to join in the same. But I think that seems like the way forward. I don't know where you are on this, if you've had other conversations with other departments, police departments to that effect, but that's what I'm seeing as the path forward, for what it's worth.
I think having the discussion is super important. And I think doing the research on whether we can add one electric car or multiple electric cars in the future is really important. I think that going hybrid right now is a step in the right direction. And I want to reiterate what Councilmember Johnson said and say thank you for bringing this to us. Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? All right, we are going to bring this up for a vote then. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? Any abstentions? And that passes. All right, number 3 is authorize the mayor, Harry W. Rilling, to execute an agreement with Fleet Auto Supply under RFP project number 4123 for the upfit of police vehicles each year for an amount not to exceed $200,000 per year for an initial term of 3 years with 2 optional 1-year renewals, account as noted. Councilmember Goldstein.
Oh, I was just making the motion.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. God, my God, I have it in my notes, guys.
I'm just here to help.
I really appreciate all the support, you guys. Thank you. Thank you for the motion, Councilmember Goldstein. Any discussion on this piece? None. No questions, nothing. Councilmember Johnson.
Just for fun, I'll just ask, this is the vehicles that we've just approved, is that right?
Yes, it's the prisoner compartments, the lights, all the emergency equipment for the vehicles that were just approved, yes.
Are there any other comments or discussion on this point?
Thank you, Deputy Chief.
All right, I will call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Or raise your hand. All of those opposed? Any abstentions? And that passes unanimously. Thank you so much. We are moving on to personnel and labor relations. Ray has been sitting there very patiently this whole time. So we're going to have a discussion about the approval of the elimination of the ordinance bonus pool. Ray, I'll turn it over to you for discussion.
So my cover memo explains where we are with this. In essence, the 20 or so ordinance employees, I think 2-3 years ago, we changed their whole salary structure to look like the attachments that you have. So it resembles some of the union pay scales. I'm sure some of you are familiar with steps in pay scales and collective bargaining agreements. So we've done that. We have, up until now, have had a bonus pool for the employees on this schedule. But as we worked with prior common councils to change the salary structure, one of the things that we kept our eye on was that there would come a day when the justification for the bonus, the financial justification for the bonuses for the ordinance employees would dissipate. And we're at that point right now. We think that the salary schedules that are on the documents I gave you are sufficient to allow us to have competitive salaries with the market out there and to keep the ordinance employees competitive with or above their subordinates who are in the unionized workforce for the city. So much discussion happened last year with various city officials and some common council members about how we phase out, and we came up with the item that you have in front of you tonight for approval. That is, take the bonus pool that should have been distributed last July 1st and distribute half of it in cash, take the other half, roll it into the rate of pay, and tell all of the ordinance employees that the bonus pool is now moved through. So that's the essence of where we are tonight. I'm asking you to approve this change and modification to the elimination of the bonus pool for the ordinance employees.
So I'd like to ask to move this item. Motion to move. Thank you, Councilmember Goldstein. Any questions or comments for Ray? Councilmember Goldstein.
Two quick ones. First, let's talk about the 50K, the 50,000 first from 2021. The 25% that's being paid out as a cash bonus, have the amounts already been allocated as to who is getting what and how much? Or is that something
those amounts, those determinations are made by the mayor in his discretion based upon his assessment of the performance of the subject employees during the course of the prior fiscal year, in consultation with his chiefs and with the performance evaluations that are filled out.
I guess my question was, had that process already occurred? That's whether that discretionary process has happened for those, no, for the last time this is happening.
No, historically, that doesn't happen until the Common Council approves the funds being distributed. Then the mayor determines how they will be distributed. And then just the second question of in perpetuity. So there would be the dissolution of this fund. And obviously you've been sort of scaling and a percentage increase in the salaries of these employees on a commensurate with their union, with other unionized employees. How is that going to be submitted in perpetuity, essentially, so that it's just going to be part of the budget request? How are we going to know that this is happening and keeping pace? Typically, what will happen is the unionized workforce in the city has received for the past 5 and will receive for the next 3 years a 2.35% annual wage adjustment to their base salary. every July 1st, I come to the Common Council and say, Common Council, the unionized workforce has received a 2.35% increase from all perspectives, equity, compression, every other perspective. Please approve a 2.35% increase for the ordinance employees, and the Common Council does that.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you. And Councilmember Goldstein touched on most of my questions. My only, I guess this is just more big picture, but I know when we talked about this last time in last term, there were these issues potentially with, like, how do we make sure that there's pay equity moving forward, given that, you know, we don't know who might be in these roles moving into the future. Can you speak a little bit to that, Mr. Burney, about how that was thought about in this proposal?
Pay equity in what context? Do you mean amongst the peers in their various jobs in the city, or pay equity amongst sexes and races and everything else? I'm not sure.
Well, I guess it could be both.
Context is.
Yeah. Sorry, I guess it could be both. I know we were talking about it in terms of making sure that there were, you know,
well, if you look at you're freezing and I can't hear you. I don't know whether it's my contact or yours, but I can no longer hear you.
I think it's
Me.
you, Ray. Yeah.
I think it's you.
Okay. Can you repeat your question?
Sure, Ray. So the idea of pay equity being to make sure that, as you mentioned in your memo, that folks who are unionized and the ordinance workers would not have drastically different salaries. But then also, I think it does speak to this notion of particularly gender, even race and ethnicity, making sure that there's equity there. That I guess you could assume the unionized jobs, because of how they're structured, it's baked in there, but how are we going to ensure that here too? Yeah.
Well, if you look at the job titles on the charts that I have attached, and grouping of their place in the city's administration. Like all the chiefs except for one have the same basic rate of pay, and then so on down the road. The ones that are sort of clustered together have the same basic rate of pay. So I think that addresses part of your question. As you point out, the unionized workforce comes in and they come in at the rate of pay the contract says. Relative to the employees that we've hired in the past 5, for most of that time, as you may know, it's been prohibited by Connecticut state law to ask people what their prior salary is. So the salary that we have negotiated with the various employees in these jobs is based upon their salary demands, assessment of their experience, qualifications, and their relative standing to people similarly situated in the city. So I guess my answer to your question is it's going to fall somewhat on the personnel director in consultation with the chief of staff and the mayor as to the salaries that will be offered to people who fill these jobs in the future, to make sure that they are in line with equity, experience, skill, and whatever other criteria we're going to use to determine the salaries.
Thank you very much, Ray. I was thinking about this recently because I know that not too long ago that disclosure law at the state level went into effect about the pay ranges. So it just got me thinking. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to offer a couple bits of insight, having been the previous personnel chair. First, to Ms. Johnson's question regarding equity in pay. It was about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe, that we adjusted salaries for the ordinance workers to create more equity for those workers compared to the union workers. For example, like a couple of secretarial positions. One secretary, due to the nature of being an ordinance worker and confidentiality factors, was not able to be in a union. And her union counterpart was making $25,000 a year more than she was, even though they'd been hired at the same time. So things like that were addressed. And also just making sure that our ordinance workers were being paid equitably compared to what, other towns and cities around were paying as well. We want to, keep our valuable workforce. So that was addressed several years ago. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention regarding ending this bonus pool is that, it was started kind of as a Band-Aid a number of years ago. I had long understood that it was under Mayor Moshe's administration, but I'd recently heard that it even predated him, that this bonus pool was instituted. And it's really just a Band-Aid to, boost the pay a little bit of the ordinance workers. And it seemed the more equitable thing was to just pay the workers equitably. And additionally, the committee, as well as the Common Council members, have long had some concerns about, accountability and transparency. And, it just seemed best to just end it and roll this $50,000 bonus pool into their salaries.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments or questions? Then I am going to call for a vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All those opposed? Any abstentions? That passes unanimously. Thank you so much, Mr. Burney. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for handling that, and we'll put this on the agenda for the next Common Council meeting for their final approval.
Perfect. Thank you so
Great.
much. We
Thank
will.
you.
So now we are on to our last discussion item, which does not require me to move anything, thank God. And it is a roundtable about capital and operating budget overview from each of the departments. So I don't know if there's any particular department that wants to kick us off, but we are interested in hearing from you about what your requests have been for capital and operating this coming year and what the status of those requests are.
I can start if you'd like.
I would love that. Thank you, Chief.
Okay. As far as the capital budget, our capital budget is very vanilla, pretty much. It's the vehicles that we've discussed already. And just one or two other items. In fact, this year, it's only one other item that's been on there for the last 5 or 6 years. And it's been pushed by finance several times. It's in there again this year. And that is for a Faro scanner to replace our current unit in our ID bureau. And what that is basically it's a computerized 3-dimensional crime scene crash reconstruction device that produces a 3D image for court and also for insurance as well. But primarily we do that for court use for crime scenes. It reduces the time that our crime scene unit spends from hours and hours to basically 20-30 minutes, because it does it all automatically and produces within 1 millimeter, enough that court accepts it, a real life simulation of the crime scene or the crash reconstruction. And again, we have that device now, but it's an old version. It's no longer supported. And that's one of the items. And the other item is our vehicle purchase. That's it. For the operating budget, as always, pretty much almost all of our top operating budget is personnel costs, salaries and stipends and benefits and et cetera. We have very little discretionary funds. Our budget this year is pretty much flat from last year, operating wise, aside from the contractual pay raises and things like that, contractual issues. But there's very little increase anywhere else in the budget. We've been very cognizant of the mayor's request to keep our operating budget at such that he usually tells us he wants to keep it within a certain amount, and we've tried to do that. And we've usually gone in, and finance rarely cuts anything or requests cuts because we come in basically at what we have been asked to do. And then for the capital budget, the only thing that we've suffered with a few times is the cut of vehicles. Usually it's one or two vehicles. And that's only because the finance director, now the comptroller, has a total budget cap on the capital budget that he needs to stay under. And once he gets to that point, he looks at where he can cut X number of dollars. And that's kind of where we've fallen in the past. And right now, all our requests have been approved tentatively by the finance department. Now it's waiting all the other approvals, which still has a ways to go. So I really can't comment on anything that's been cut because we haven't gotten there yet. But that's kind of where we stand.
My understanding is that the cars may be, they may be looking at the chopping block for some of them.
Well, again, nothing's been finalized, but again, that's usually where they look to cut costs, is in our vehicles. And again, it sets us behind, and then we're always fighting, but we'll see what happens.
And you had said, and correct me if I'm wrong, it was 10 patrol vehicles and 3 unmarked cars. Is that what the request was?
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
And that's the same request we had last year. Last year, the 3 unmarked were cut. And I think 1 patrol car, I forget exactly, but the year before we had a couple of patrol cars cut. Our number of vehicles has ranged. We were asking for 12 in the past, which we've gotten, and it was dropped based on our chart that was developed several years ago on how to replace the cars to get the mileage down and the repairs, et cetera. Yes.
Just out of curiosity, because I do not know how much something like this costs, but approximately how much does a Faro scanner set?
That
the
is
department
that
back?
is 160,000.
Okay.
I believe. Is that right, Sue?
No.
I don't have it in front of me.
It's $110,000.
110,000. I over.
Oh, it's a discount. It's a discount.
And that is really needed. The current one that we have is really no longer supported and really on its last legs. And it, especially for a substantial crime scene, the technology and equipment is really needed.
Well, and I want to bring you back to a point that you made, that it reduces time for the crime unit. And I know that recruitment is low for you all right now. So, anything we can save in terms of time and resources, is a plus.
It also
it
also helps the community. A lot of times we have to close roads for an extended period of time while measurements are taken and things like that, especially on crash reconstruction. So using that device really can get traffic moving and open roads up, get people back to their homes, et cetera, et cetera. So
great.
It's a
Thank you.
win-win
Are
for
there
everybody.
any- Great. Are there any questions or comments for police department? Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks, Chairman Murr. We all know I already am excited about the idea of maybe one of these EVs.
I'll be happy to drive a Tesla next year if I get the approval.
Let's get you a Tesla, Chief. That's what I'm all about.
All right,
That was the
I'm
right
in.
answer.
Right answer. Yes. No, but I feel like, I feel like in this great scheme of things, we're moving forward, and that's a step we can kind of just, I'd support you all on trying to advocate for that in the budget, even though you're saying the cars are on the chopping block. But my reason for raising my hand is because I'm curious, what do you feel the need is for social worker in your department? I know that's.
Yeah, actually, we put together a plan with an outside agency to come in and provide a full-time embedded social worker in the department at a cost that was going to be about $110,000, something like that. We presented that to the city. It was looked on favorably, but the city requested that we look at it a little further and developed a committee to look at different options, not just what we had suggested. So right now, what we had suggested is on hold, and the larger look, so to speak, we were going to copy basically what Stanford put in place last year, which has been very successful. And so now Lamont Daniels is chairman of a committee to look at whether we should use that system or come up with some other hybrid. I hate to use the word hybrid again, but some other kind of system for the city. And right now, that's where we are. It's kind of been in a holding pattern for several months.
Chief, I wanted, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I wanted to let you know that I had brought our discussion about this very issue to Councilmember Johnson. And we had brought it to the mayor's office. And so there is supposed to be a meeting happening around whatever the plan is moving forward, but it's definitely something that I have tried to escalate. So I just followed up with them today to see when that meeting is being scheduled. And I'm looking forward to having conversations around that very issue very soon.
Very good. And we're 100% in favor of doing that. It's definitely a win. There's no downside to it.
Absolutely. Any other questions or comments for the police department? Chief Gatto, are you still with us? Would you like to go
thank
over
you all.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Hi, Chief Gatto. Thanks for your patience.
No problem. I am here. Thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. I know some of you, but not all of you, so I'll just introduce myself, Chief Gino Gatto, Norwalk Fire Department, obviously. We are in the same situation as the police department. Most of our capital projects involve vehicles, and I'll go through them quickly because I know it's been a long night for you. We have Frontline Apparatus, obviously, that responds to over 12,000 fire calls a year. And they consist of fire engines, which carry water. They consist of ladder trucks, which carry the ladders, and some other specialty vehicles. So last year, we put in for a replacement of a 2007 fire engine, which is on a 12-year replacement schedule. That was not approved last year. So this year, to keep on schedule, we are putting in for two fire engines. One is to replace the 07 and one is to replace the 09. And the way we rotate the fleet is these 07s and 09s will go into our reserve status, and we will go to surplus 2001 to 2001 engines. So that's a big ticket item. It's $1,350,000. And to be honest with you, I don't think that's even enough money for two of them right now, because there's a 7% increase coming up in a couple of months. Any questions on that?
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you. Hi, Chief. Is that 7% increase on the parts? Is this a supply chain issue?
No, it's a manufacturer's increase.
Okay. Okay.
It's typically industry-wide 3%, but for some reason now it's going up 7%. But you know, that'll be to be determined. So there's actually 6 different projects here, so I'll try to get through them pretty quick. So we also have a ladder truck refurbishment. What we want to do is we have a 2010 tiller ladder truck that we bought brand new at over $850,000 10 years ago. That truck is now developing a lot of rust and a lot of rot underneath it due to the salt and, you know, other wear and tear that we have in there. So we had a reputable fire apparatus repair where they do body work and everything, came and went over the whole vehicle, and they're recommending $117,000 refurbish. And we're thinking that if we can get that truck refurbished, we can keep it on the road for at least another 10 years. So we're trying to extend the life of the vehicle as well as trying to save the city money, because a new ladder truck is probably $1.5 million by the time you order it. Questions on that? Okay. We have an account in the capital budget that we call building repairs on various stations, because we have 5 different fire stations, 1 maintenance garage, and a training tower. This year we broke it up a little differently because we're actually stating what the money would be used for. So we're asking for $87,500. It's a $35,000 miscellaneous building repairs to cover all the stations. We're looking at $15,000 to do a locker room upgrade at headquarters, because we recently hired female firefighters, and we're going to be working on getting them a separate locker room for them. And also at Station 5, we want to do the same thing. That's another $10,000. And there's a apparatus maintenance lighting upgrade for the maintenance garage to get all new, get rid of the sodium lights and install LED lighting for them. And there's a $15,000 preliminary drawing plan for renovation of the Westport Avenue station, which is just be drawings to see how we could upgrade the building and possibly relocate a company up there at a later date. But those are just a preliminary architect fee for that. Questions? Yes, sir. Hi, Tom.
How are you, Chief? What's the status of the Broad River?
Yes. That
Building?
whole nightmare, the Broad River nightmare?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going on probably 2 years by now. The project went out to bid. We hired a contractor. They started to do work on it. October, November of last year, we kept questioning some of the quality of their work. And to make a long story short, we pretty much threw them off the job. So this whole past year, we've been negotiating with the bonding company and corporation counsel. We had to go out to bid, get another contractor in there. We have a contractor now. The bonding company has agreed to the cost of the repairs and replacements of what needs to be done there to finish the project. They're supposed to have started work last month, but that didn't happen. Here we are at the end of January, and it's still not happening. Unfortunately, through this new contractor, after doing his walkthrough, it was found that the HVA system in the building does not have any makeup air coming in, which is against the code. Bill Ireland, the chief building inspector for the city, came and looked at it, and he agreed that the building is not up to code. There's some asbestos tiles that need to be encapsulated, which was not a problem when we started this whole thing, over a year ago. So I'm going to have to ask for special appropriation when we get the actual numbers for this whole emergency repair. The purchasing department is allowing it to be titled emergency repair procurement. So that's about where we are now. We're waiting for some final numbers. And then we're gonna hopefully get the project started. So it's been a long time.
Thanks, Chief.
Okay. So we are also.
Oh, Councilmember Revelous, did you have a question?
All right.
This may be a sidebar. I'm so sorry if it is, but just because you're saying this, what are the functionalities and how many repairs does the fire department on Meadow Street look at or gets looked at? Because that's a fire department that I rarely see actually have activity in. So just encapsulation of the all these budgets and going over this roundtable, just wondering how much of your requests come for that station, because I don't see a lot happening. Not to say they're not, I just don't see a lot happening with that Meadow Street Police Department.
Okay, the Meadow Street Fire Station.
So I'm sorry, fire station, sorry.
Police on your mind.
Right.
That station, we just remodeled the whole kitchen in there. They just remodeled the bunk room in there. That's one of the stations we want to build a female locker room. And that's also part of my capital here. Last year, I put in for $145,000 for a new roof for that station. And they only granted me $100,000. So there's no way I could put a roof up for $100,000. So I'm coming back this year to ask for $55,000 more to be able to finish that roof project. That whole building was painted on the outside this year. That building out in front got completely all new landscaping. And we actually have a plaque on a wall that we dedicated to past Chief Sanford Anderson, which is on the building. What else did we do? We put all new lighting on the apparatus floor last year, not too long ago. So, I mean, we may not advertise a lot of the stuff that we do, but I'm trying to keep all these buildings from deteriorating and trying to improve as we go along.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. You can stop by anytime. And we'll give you, you can come inside, we'll show you the building.
I would love to. I would love that.
Okay, so we have on another item, we have 23 vehicles, all different support vehicles, fire marshal's office, the chief, the assistant chiefs, some of the mechanics. We have support vehicles, and those are also on a replacement schedule. And I can't show you because I don't know if I can show you this. It's hard to see. We have a replacement schedule for the vehicles as well as the apparatus. So we're putting in this year to replace a 2008, a 2012 and 2012, 2 Explorers and 1 pickup truck. And we're looking at Ford makes a smaller size pickup called a Maverick pickup truck, and it'll be used if the inspectors need to use it for like a fire investigation. Part of they don't, NFPA doesn't want you to have contaminated gear inside the cab of any vehicle. So now with a pickup, they can take all their dirty equipment and tools or whatever they do at a fire investigation, and all that could be stored in the back of the pickup. And the Maverick is a little bit bigger than a Ford Escape, which currently a lot of the inspectors drive Ford Escapes. The unfortunate part is that this vehicle, to get into an all-wheel drive, only comes in a gas motor, 2.0 configuration. So we can't get it in a hybrid or anything else for that matter. So we're just putting it for regular 3 pickup Maverick pickup trucks for $75,000. Questions?
Councilmember
Yes.
Johnson.
You answered my question, Chief, about the ability to go hybrid or even EV. Is that something that
Right, we were through this last year, the same thing. If you remember, we were questioned, we ordered 2 cars last year and we were questioned, you know, why didn't we go electric? Why didn't we go hybrid? Our mechanic, our lead mechanic said pretty much the same thing that the Chief Koholwick said. We don't have any, the infrastructure is not there. So we don't have any charging stations. His concern was the whole battery replacement. There's issues with that. I'm not familiar with it, so I really can't answer that. But these particular vehicles don't come in anything other than gas right now. I know Ford makes an all-electric full-size pickup, but that's not what we're in the market for. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
So I talked about Station 5 roof replacement. That was not a capital project. And the last one is, last year we applied for a new fire boat through the Port Security Grant. So we're looking to replace our 24-foot 1985 fiberglass that was a refurbished police boat. And we were lucky that we were able to secure the grant. So it's a $240,000 total grant with the city's cost share of 25%, which is $60,000. So I'm putting in for a $60,000 matching funds for this boat, which we were awarded. And we have 3 years to use to use the money. I think we're getting on our 2nd year now. Questions? Okay. The operating budget obviously is very much involved with all salaries, overtime account. We work a little differently than the police department because we have 140 firefighters. We don't have a full complement. So anytime anybody is off, because we have vacancies, that has to be filled by overtime. And last year we had 17 vacancies. So our overtime budget was pretty high. And since then we hired 12 people and we got that number of vacancies down, but now as of next month, we'll be back up to 9 vacancies. So the only changes in our operating really are just some contractual increases for stipends, a little more money in the overtime account and the salary because we hired more people. We have where we pay for our fire hydrants in the city. And the First District Water and South Norwalk Electric have both raised their rates, which caused us to obviously increase our prices. So we're going from $299,000 up to $316,000 just in the water account for the hydrants. And then we also pay rent to Third Taxing District for our East Norwalk station. That's also going up, I think 4 or 5% to like $48,000 or $49,000. We've increased our clothing account because we hired more people, so we have to buy uniforms and turnout gear. Those are the We also, the fire commissioners approved at the end of last year for us to hire 2 part-time fire inspectors. So we put those in the budget for next year. That increased that line to 63,000, from 64,000 to 101,000. Every 2 years, we have to give promotional exams by contract. So this past year, we did not have to give one, but next year we do, which is a lieutenant, captain, and deputy chief promotion. That's an extra. We had to add $37,716 to pay for the exams. I think that's about it. So anyway, the bottom line, I'll get to it. So we're requesting $21,865,509. Questions?
Councilmember Burnett.
Yeah, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, Chief.
Okay.
How you doing? If I remember from my days on the BET, are we still renting the fire hydrants?
Yes.
Have we at any point looked at if it's cost effective to try to purchase fire hydrants and own them versus the rental fee?
They're owned by the water companies.
Right.
So they rent them to us. As you could tell by the numbers, I don't think they would ever say, okay, we'll just let the city buy them. You know, I don't know. I mean, that's, as long as I've been here for 40 years, the water companies own the hydrants and we pay rent on them every year. Unfortunately, they keep raising the prices.
Yeah, and that was the concern part, that many years ago, we started seeing the rental price go up, you know, quite a bit. And it was almost as if we were in the position where we had no choice but to pay it, because what would we do if we don't pay the rental costs for the fire hydrants? What would they do? Not give us access to them? So, you know, I'm just curious as that if, you know, how we could possibly invest some type of analytics to see if there might be a cost-effective solution to bring a proposal to the districts in terms of, you know, in the long run, there might be some savings to the city or some kind of cap on the rental price, because it just keeps going up and up each year. Yeah.
They're supposed to let the city know 6 months in advance if they're going to increase their prices. The second district has not done that yet. The first district, they went up to $214.60 a hydrant, where I believe last year they were $206 a hydrant. And I'm just assuming that the other department will follow suit and raise it the same as them. But I don't know, you raise an interesting point. I don't know if it's feasible to purchase a fire hydrant, because they take care of, if a hydrant got damaged, they replace it. When we use a hydrant at a fire, they don't charge us for the water. And if there's a new development, a hydrant has to be put in, we don't get charged for that. You know, they assume that cost, we just pay for the rental of the hydrant. So, I don't know. Who would even start that conversation with them. The Corporation Council will try to figure out if we could buy the fire hydrants. I don't know.
That's a good point, Ben. And I mean, the information you just shared is that the cost goes beyond just purchasing the hydrant. Then you have the maintenance associated with it. So it becomes a question, a trade-off, whether the city who want to absorb that expense also of being in the position of not only owning the hydrants, but also maintaining them. And we would have to have supply and
Right.
expertise.
So
Yeah.
if you remember when the big increase came last year, I did look into what some of the other towns were paying, and Fairfield is paying over $1 million for their water bill to Aquarian, because they charge them by the size, not the size, but the number of foot of pipe in the ground that they have that they pay for as well. And Stanford is the same thing. They're over $1 million for their water bill. So I don't know. I'm
Chief,
sure if
do you
we
have the numbers in front of you of how much we pay for rentals of the hydrants, just to compare?
I do. So we have 886 hydrants through the first district water department. Last year we paid, it was 213 a hydrant. Now it's going up to 214. So that comes out to $190,564. The South Norwalk Electric is not as many, it's 589 hydrants. They charged us 206 last year for $121,334. If they raise it to equal the first district, we'll be paying $126,399 for that. Put those two together and you're at $316,964, which it was around $300 last year.
Councilmember Johnson, did you still have a question? Okay, sorry.
No, Councilmember Burnett has covered it all. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments for Chief Gatto? Oh, Councilmember Alterman.
I'm so sorry. I just had one question. Could you just repeat the number you said that you have to pay for examinations for the promotions?
Yep, it's I believe it's 37,000.
716.
Okay, yep. So it's three exams: a lieutenant exam, which is 13,084, a captain exam, which is 12,316, and deputy chief exam, which is 12,000, same 316. So it involves a written exam and an oral exam. We have an outside company that comes in and does the promotional exams.
And since I'm new to this, is that price typical for an exam?
These are actually good price. We've gotten bids much higher than that. And the Resource Management is a company that we use out of Chicago, and we've used them, I don't know, probably the last 5 years to do all the tests.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for Chief Gatto while we have him tonight? Thank you, Chief Gatto. We appreciate your time going through all that with us.
Okay, sorry we didn't the other day.
Oh, that's okay. I'll come back. Don't worry. You can't get rid of me that easy.
Okay.
Ms. DeLuca, do you have anything you want to go over in terms of budgets?
Hi, good evening. I'm actually under the fire department budget, so I'm nice and easy.
Right.
Very
I
low
just wanted to make
maintenance.
sure there wasn't anything extra that you were asking for.
Nope, thank you though.
No problem. Anything else from anyone? I just want to thank everyone. I know this was a long meeting this evening. I don't not anticipate that all meetings will be this extensive. It's our first one and there's a lot to go over, especially during budget season, as we all know. I pride myself on being efficient. If nothing else, obviously I will improve upon my motion to move items. And Diana Revoluce's favorite part, can I call
Motion to
for
adjourn.
a motion to adjourn?
Wait, Nicole wants to say something.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry,
See how y'all
Councilmember
don't
Harris.
follow rules? I had my hand up. I just,
Not
Sorry.
fast
just want
enough.
to,
She's super
I just wanted
fast.
to say, no, I had my hand up before she started talking.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to say to you, Chairman McMurray, congratulations on your first meeting. It's always hard to do it one time, but you did a good job. And we all have learning curves, but as you continue to have committee meetings, you'll get better and better. So I just want to acknowledge that you did a wonderful job. Hats off to you. Now, Diana, you can do your motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Great job, Jen. Well done.
Thank you very much. All in favor of adjournment?
I don't need to.
Any opposed? No, thank you so much, you guys. Have a
Good
great
night.
night. I really appreciate it.
Have
a good
night. Bye now.
Good night, all.